idea. I'd just like to introduce our guest speaker, Professor Jessica Meeuwig from the University of Western Australia. We really appreciate her coming out to speak to people around the southwest on this tour with us. Jessica is the director of the Marine Futures Project at the University of Western Australia, which she'll talk to you a little bit about, and this video is a part of that, and she'll talk about that. But she's been researching marine life, and particularly fish, in the southwest for the last 10 years. So hand over to Jessica.
Can everybody hear me all right in the back? Yep, it's all right, so I'll shout a little bit. This is a glimpse of what is around the Southwest Capes if you're actually underwater. So we've been collecting video footage for the last nearly 10 years in this region to basically try and understand what's out there, why it's special, and how it possibly is changing into the future. And this is my favorite actually, the cuttlefish, and he's about to nail the poor eel. Life sucks as an eel. But basically, the reason I like to flag that is because not only does this video give us an understanding of what species are out there, how many there are, how big they are, it actually gives us an insight into their behavior and what they're doing. And I think the behavior of our marine environment, yeah, they're not too smart. That's a gray nurse shark, threatened species, possibly a reason why. They respond quite sensitively to these spinning diodes, which give off a little bit of electrical current, and sharks are very sensitive to that. So, and that guy's a very stubborn ray. Sort of, I want it. But this sort of imagery gives us a really clear understanding of what's out there and allows us to benchmark our marine environment. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about why it's so important to understand what's out there and why that relates to marine sanctuaries. So I'm going to start off and see life sucks again as an eel. That was a shag that got that one. And this is rubberless. They're just so beautiful. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about why WA's marine environment is so special. But I just want to make a link, which I haven't talked so much in Bunbury and Bustleton about, in terms of, if you can pull up my presentation, about the issue with oil off Cape Naturalist. 80 kilometers west of Margaret River, there's a proposal for oil wells and exploration. And the Montara oil spill that we had last year was actually an exploration well. It wasn't a production well. So there is a strong link between setting aside areas as marine parks and saying no to oil. We need to start thinking about why do we say these places are special and protecting them so that we have grounds for saying, nah, we don't actually want that here. Y'all have had a big win with the coal, and we need to actually extend that to say, no, our marine environment is special as well, not just our vineyards, not just our life in Margaret River, but our offshore environment, which supports fishing, surfing, and a fantastic marine environment. We need to protect that as well. So there is actually a very strong link between marine parks and no oil. So on that note, and this okay, we go back to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about the Southwest fishes and why they're special. I'm also going to talk about why they're vulnerable. And then I'm going to talk about why marine sanctuaries are a really important part about protecting them for the future. That doesn't work.
Did.
Tin. Is that the bottom one? Am I holding this one? There we go. Okay, so first of all, what's special about Western Australia? It's really, really big. I'm Canadian originally, and I was stunned by how large Western Australia is when I got here. We've got nearly 13,000 kilometers of coastline, 4,000 islands, and it extends all the way from the tropics to the temperate areas. And what that means is that we actually don't know a lot about Western Australia in terms of what's under the ocean. It's largely unknown, and that has major implications for how we protect it. The other really important thing about Western Australia, and what's special about it, is the Lewin Current. The Lewin Current is the only current that comes down the west side of a continent in the world. If you go to South Africa, if you go to South America, their currents on the west side actually go up from the Antarctic. So they come with all this nutrient-rich water, and they support really productive fisheries. Whereas our currents come down from the Indonesian archipelago, there's not a lot in them, the water's really clear, and our fisheries are relatively low in their productivity. One of the implications of low productivity is that our fish are really old and they're slow growing. So the western blue grouper, for instance, will live to 80 years. The western foxfish, which is only about half a meter long, will live to 60 years. Jewfish about 40. So basically what happens is these fish arrive, they start to grow relatively quickly, get to a decent size, and then they just hang out. And they hang out for years and years and years. And they're waiting for a good, strong year where there's a little bit more productivity and they can actually pass their genes on for the next round, right? So we now know the Department of Fisheries has said that our Jewfish recruitment relies on species that are about 14, 16 years old. And there are not a lot of them. So the fact that our waters are low in their productivity, that these fish are well adapted to living there, has implications for how we fish them. They're also really complex. And this is my little insight into fish being kind of weird animals. They do change sex. So if you take the example of western blue grouper, with good sense they start off as females, and they'll spend about 30 years hanging out as females, and then for no apparent reason that we clearly understand, they'll turn into males.
Bit sexist.
Well, and does that remind you of any of our politicians? Little red sticks? But the implications are, and since you brought it up, I'll talk about polls shortly, but if we remove large animals from the system, we actually don't understand what that means for reproduction. So if you take out big males, does the largest female say, I guess it's bloody well time? Or does she say, I'm not ready yet? What do? We don't know. We don't know what triggers fish to change sex, and it has implications in terms of how we exploit them. While I'm on the topic of sex, how many people know that Jewfish have the smallest balls per body weight of any fish? Am I the only one who knows that?
Never asked them.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about that is if you've got small balls, it implies you're in a good, stable relationship, right? You're doing the whole chocolates and flowers thing, and you're not competing with a whole pile of other males, right? So what we're seeing in the Perth metropolitan area is that some of the Jewfish females, even though it's spawning season, they're actually not getting ready. Their eggs are not ready. They're looking around the bar, and they're saying, teenagers can't be bothered, right? So, there's all these complicated things about what fish are doing that we don't even understand in an environment that's very unproductive. And despite the fact that there are not that many people in Western Australia, we're still managing to have a major impact on our marine environment. Enough about sex. The other interesting thing about Western Australia is that many of the species that we have here are found nowhere else in the world. So Jewfish and Baltic grouper only found in Western Australia, western blue grouper only found in Australia, breaksea cod, and so on. And our data, if you look from Rottnest to Middle Island, east of Esperance, you go from about 50% of the fish that you see out there only found in Australia, and if you get down around Esperance, only 80% of the fish are only found in Australia, right? So effectively, these are species that are well adapted to this environment, and they're not found anywhere else in the world. So if we don't take care of them here, it's not like we can rely on the Kiwis to do it for us, right? So it really goes to the point that this is a very special marine environment, and we need to start thinking about how do we take care of it.